The third question we said needed looking at is where the loudspeakers are going to be placed. Sound, as anyone can tell you who's had their party shut down by police after complaints from residents 6 blocks away, can travel in long and mysterious ways. How sound travels is called dispersion, and it's both an interesting and extremely important thing to consider for a number of reasons. The process starts with the design of the loudspeakers themselves. Notice how this high-frequency horn is flared. This helps the sound develop while controlling dispersion. Next issue is how you position the cabinets to give as many people in the audience a balanced and blended sound. To make the whole procedure as natural as possible for the audience, loudspeakers are normally positioned beside or sometimes above the stage so that the final sound appears to be coming from the stage in one unified direct package. Placement is key to getting the best coverage with the least amount of wasted amplifier power. You need to aim loudspeakers directly at the intended audience. Doing this will avoid 2 major pitfalls. 1, using too much volume, and 2, causing intelligibility problems. Often, novice sound people will immediately go for the master fader on the console when audience members complain they can't hear. This actually might be the very reason for the complaints in the first place. As the sound person, it's your job to understand that the "I can't hear" complaint from an audience member is more likely "I can't understand." This is a common problem in houses of worship, where the audience tends to be a bit older and may be beginning to suffer the early effects of hearing loss. Turning up the sound in a room with a poorly designed or installed sound system is like throwing a rock in a pool of water. The air just becomes full of sound waves travelling in every direction. So how does this relate to loudspeakers? Since the loudspeaker is the place in the system that the signal is actually converted back into acoustic energy, it is also the place where you have at least some control over where this energy gets put into the environment. If you're looking to install a system permanently in a space, you should contact an audio contractor or consultant to help you make the right decisions. And before you do this, why not visit venues that are similar to yours and find out who worked on their systems? Well, provided you liked what you heard, of course. If you're either using a different system every night, or using the same system in a different environment every night, we have plenty of tips on maximising your sound and troubleshooting in the Golden Rules scene. Use speaker cable and don't skimp on it. Loudspeakers are connected to amplifiers using speaker cabling. Even if it can sometimes use a 1/4" jack connector, this is not the same as an instrument cable. Use good, thick cable and use a shorter length of cabling as your environment can tolerate. You want to position your power amplifiers as close as you can to the speakers without them being intrusive.
We always try to minimize the amount of cable between the speaker and the amplifier because they sound better. There's no reason to waste your amplifier power heating up the copper in the cable. You want to basically get your amplifiers as close to the speakers as you can. Sometimes when you can't, you need to use the 150s, but anytime you can use the 5 or the 10 footers, it's really the best thing to do.
So to close, here are 1 or 2 specific tips on loudspeakers. 1. When setting up your loudspeakers, make sure they are secure and don't wobble or rattle. Keep cabs that are being placed together nice and tight. 2. If you want to increase the effectiveness of a subwoofer, move it over to where the side wall meets the floor, better yet, the corner of a room. Since this is a place where 90-degree triangles start in the room, you have the start of a large horn. This little trick can be as powerful as doubling your amplifier power. 3. Protect your speakers. Loudspeakers do not appreciate loud audio spikes. Make sure the level controls on your connected amps and mixer are down before you power up or power down. And remember, amps should always be switched on last and turned off first. 4. If your drivers are unavoidably exposed to moisture, do not use them at all until they are thoroughly dried out and preferably checked out. We've looked at all the controls contained in a variety of mixers, and we've looked at how a mixer fits into the complete sound reinforcement picture. Now we get to the fun stuff, where all of this raw material gets connected, and all of the individual sounds from your mics and instruments are assembled into a unified mix for your audience to hear. The Geyser Stop Music Festival in Northern California is the venue we've chosen to put all of our explorations into sound reinforcement to the test. A real gig with real issues and a wide variety of real players and a real audience.
Planning is everything. Before you even put the equipment in the van, you need to figure out what you're going to need for the show and the venue in question, basically how big of a system, and then figure out how you're going to set that system up. Most importantly, make sure you have all the cables you need in order to do so. In fact, it's a good idea to throw in some extra cables. The venue we've chosen for this connecting up the system scene is an outdoor festival where several very diverse bands and musicians are going to be performing. The space is fairly small, and around 300 people are expected. Here's the equipment we've chosen for the job. 2 Yamaha P3500S power amps, 1 Yamaha P5000S power amp, 2 Yamaha SW118 subwoofers, 2 Yamaha S115 main speakers, 2 Yamaha SM12 monitor wedges, a Yamaha MG324 mixer, which is an expanded version of the mixer we used during the main mixer scene in this program, an effects rack, and a whole heap of cables. Even at the most bizarre of venues, essentially the stage will be at one end and the audience at the other. Having schlepped the gear out of the van, place the speakers loosely where you need them, on either side of the stage. The mixer needs to be in a place where the engineer can both see and hear the stage well, but also be as unobtrusive to the audience as possible. If you're going to be using monitor speakers, place them alongside each performer that needs them. Power amps should be placed close to the speakers to keep the cable runs short. Make sure the amps are accessible, but don't interfere with the performers on stage. Once your speakers, monitors, and power amps are in place, it's time to start hooking up the cables. Hook the speaker cables up between the power amps and the speakers, and between the power amp and the monitors. Once those are done, it's time to bring out the snake. A snake is just a series of cables bound together that give you a series of sends, that is, cables that carry signals from the stage to the mixer, and then a series of returns, cables for getting signals from the mixer back to the stage, like your main and monitor mix. A big advantage of using the snake is that all your cables are housed in a single, larger cable that's easily run from the stage to the mixer, and it's easy to tape to the floor to keep people from tripping over it. Hook the returns from your mixer to the main power amps and the power amp you're using for your monitors. Depending on the kind of snake you end up using, these connections will either be balanced XLR cables or quarter-inch line cables. Once your returns are set, the next step is to get your mics out and set up on stage. Place your vocal mics in the general area where your singers will be, right by the monitors. The mics get patched into the snake head using XLR cables. This process is repeated as the rest of the band gets set up. Take your mics from the drums and the guitarist and patch them into the snake, as well as instrument feeds from your bass player and keyboard player. Now that you're all cabled up, we can switch everything on and start testing.
To the untrained observer, a sound check is just an excuse for various members of the road crew to strut about on stage before the show going
1, 2, 2, 1
into the mics. But that's actually just the tip of this particular iceberg. A sound check, as its name implies, is a critically important time for the person operating the out-front sound and the musicians on stage, and yes, even if you're one and the same person, to make sure everything is sounding as it should in order to produce a great show. We've already looked at the controls in a typical channel strip, and we've seen how these are used in practice. Now we're going to look at a whole range of different instruments and sound sources, and see how these would be handled during the sound check.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.